I've been playing a lot of Guild Wars 2 this year, and its recent expansion, Janthir Wilds, has been a comforting return to a similar feeling I had when I started this game over a decade ago. Something that invokes a sense of wonder. I've been trying to figure out why I've had this feeling, and I think I finally nailed it. I think it's because the setting has returned to something innately powerful, innately imaginative. It returned to mountains. I'm trying to work through why I think mountains in video games are such an emotional and immersive element, where it's perhaps different and distinct from other medias, like film and TV and books and so forth. While this cinematography is frankly breathtaking, I think games are uniquely positioned to immerse us in a world and give us a feeling, at least to me, that we're actually in the presence of mountains. Why is there comfort in looking at these towering peaks in video games? Why do mountains stick out as such memorable landmarks? Why do I get this feeling of awe? Why am I drawn to worlds with mountains? I've wrestled this down to two ideas that I think go hand in hand. They give us a glimpse of something distant, and they instill a modesty in us, an indescribable feeling of being small. Mountains are often symbolic to a type of world building and design that puts emphasis on creating a sense of vastness and wonder. People attribute this narrative in world design as Tolkien-esque, calling it distant mountain theory, that a world needs distant mountains as a way of making the world seem more than just what is right in front of you, that there are far-off ideas and places that are not explained, only hinted at. You can see the silhouettes of something more, but you can never quite get there. That in world building and design, we need distant mountains to create a degree of verisimilitude and wonder and mystery. If we can possibly see everything, know everything, what reason is there for adventure and exploration? Where's the tension? Where's the drive? And if we do know everything, that doesn't seem very believable because we can't possibly know everything in our own world. So how can we create a world where everything is knowable, seeable? I think this is the reason why many of our favorite pieces of genre literature have maps that are flanked by mountains and their sister elements, oceans and deserts. In Wheel of Time or Middle-earth, or the Northern Kingdoms or Malazan or the Forgotten Realms or Dune, you'll see mountains border the known world, and to go beyond them is the unknown. These landscapes signal distant lands that are out of reach and unknowable and mysterious. And so mountains themselves become symbols of a larger world and history than the story right in front of us. I've a small confession. I haven't actually finished Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. It's one of my most played games on Steam. It's definitely one of my favorite games of all time, yet for a bunch of reasons, I've never actually done everything in it. I know I haven't finished the main quest. Every time I pick it up again, it's always modded a little bit differently, or I have a different playstyle, or I'm going to make different little rules to follow, like no fast travel or no doing every faction quest. But the only thing that stayed the same is the first thing I do after earning my freedom in Helgen, and it's heading straight to the mountains. I also played way more Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, but I have no real desire to ever really return to Cyrodiil. Even though I know there's going to be some awesome fan-developed mods and remakes of making Oblivion more presentable to the modern audience and gamer, but I'm not really interested in Oblivion or Cyrodiil, and I think it's because of this. Climbing the 7,000 steps, hiking through river valleys, reaching the Shrine of Azura, looking at the throat of the world every time you leave the Hall of the Jarl of Whiterun. Mountains are what bring me back to Skyrim. More than character builds or systems or quest lines, I want to see mountains. Wherever I go in the land of the Nords, I always catch myself stopping, turning, and staring out at the peaks and ridges beyond. It lends to this illusion that this is a world, and I'm happy to play my part and not peek behind the curtain. The Erd Tree in Elden Ring is a kind of mountain. It towers over almost every area of the lands between. To reach it is your goal throughout the entire game, yet when you finally arrive, you don't climb it. You never ascend to the tips of its branches, like never quite being able to climb the tallest peaks in Skyrim. These views and vistas and knowledge always remain out of reach. The closest you get to climbing the Erd Tree is hiking up the Mountaintops of the Giants, which brings me to a sequence that is also one of my favorites in gaming and probably has to be one of my top 5 favorite locations in all of video games for the 2020s. This sequence here. Upon writing and reflecting and preparing for this video, I think it's no surprise that this actually might bear a lot of similarities to the 7,000 steps around the throat of the world. There's a meditative and epic and awe-inspiring quality in the physical journey across this space, but also the views and vistas you see along the way, and the precariousness of each step forward bringing something potentially dangerous and exciting. Elden Ring and many of From Software's games are filled with distant mountains. If you reach a new vista, you always see something beyond. You find things that you'll never be able to explore and visit, something always just out of reach. And so there's another way of viewing and interpreting mountains and distant towering landmarks beyond this theory. That they're in fact symbols of hyperdiegesis. This is a term coined in the early 2000s by cultural scholar Matt Hills. If diegesis is the narrative, world, or story that's seen and experienced by the audience, hyperdiegesis is the creation of a vast and detailed space, only a fraction of which is ever directly seen or encountered within the text, but which nonetheless appears to operate according to principles of internal logic and extension. To give perhaps one of the most famous examples of this is in a little 1977 film. It's this scene right here.
You fought in the Clone War?
Yes. I was once a Jedi Knight, the same as your father.
And so I think mountains, something vast, something far off, something unattainable, can act and often do act as a hyper-diegetic device in our game worlds. I think Elden Ring and many of From Software's games use the far-off mountain, be it a tower, castle, ocean, or otherwise, to much success of always making sure that whatever you're doing in the game is just one part of a larger whole, one moment in time of a larger history that is almost always indifferent to you. The Mountaintops of the Giants, to me, is my favorite embodiment in the magic of the beyond, of the past, of the distant, of a larger story. The feeling of being small in something colossal. Climbing a mountain is a kind of pilgrimage, even being at the feet of one. It's spiritual almost. This is both what the game Journey shows us and writer Robert MacFarlane writes in Mountains of the Mind, Adventures in Reaching the Summit, a book that seeks to unravel why humans have this connection and relationship with mountains. I've only finished the 2012 Game of the Year this year in 2024. I'm over a decade late, and while I knew much of what made Journey special and anecdotes from friends or across the internet, it wasn't until I played it that I felt it. Hearing about it, watching it, listening to it, and playing it are just such wildly different things. I had nameless friends help me along the initial path, but when reaching the cold mountain passes, I was all alone, trudging through the snow, upwards and onwards, the peak looming above. I think the setting of desert, mountain, and ruin in Journey all go so hand in hand to give this feeling of a world that's not made for you, a feeling of smallness, a physical, and later almost spiritual kind of humility. Reaching the summit shines a light on what's important. The titular word. The people you meet along the way. Ideas that don't respond to a flick of a switch or the turning of a dial. This echoes some of MacFarlane's writing, where he says, "Mountains seem to answer an increasing imaginative need in the West. More and more people are discovering a desire for them and a powerful solace in them. Mountains pose profound questions about our durability and the importance of our schemes. They induce, I suppose, a modesty in us. In my home province of Ontario, the one geological feature that's really missing is a good mountain. We've got the rest. Lakes like oceans, forest, hills, really big hills, rolling hills, flat farmlands, big rivers, weird stuff. But mountains were missing. It's perhaps why I always look to the vastness of Lake Superior for a similar feeling of something unattainable, something epic and ancient, something unknowable, something that makes you realize there's more to the world than you. An indescribable feeling of being small. So when I visited Italy last year on my honeymoon, it was mountains that had me enraptured. They tower everywhere. You're always in their shadow. You want to sit and have your cappuccino and just look at them. When Bilbo says to Gandalf,
"I want to see mountains again. Mountains, Gandalf. And then find somewhere quiet where I can finish my book."
I completely understood what he meant. There's a magic to being in their presence. And I only then made the really nerdy connection that I had a very similar feeling of this before. To when I look at the throat of the world from the streets and markets of Whiterun. Italy awoke this love of mountains, and someone far smarter than I gazed up at them beside me and said, "It gives you an indescribable feeling of being small, doesn't it?" I have a theory that the popularity of Skyrim is due in part to its mountains. It's easy to create vistas of wanderlust at every turn. It's easy to create believability and verisimilitude in a world where there's large areas you can't see beyond. I've no doubt that same sense of scale and vastness and history in the background is why the worlds of From Software have a similar physicality and invoke a similar feeling. I also have a suspicion that many of your favorite game worlds also bring about this sense of wonder, modesty, believability, by having mountains or oceans or deserts so present. Something that towers over, something that is distant. And I encourage you equally in your design or world building or writing to think about the role of mountains and this idea of showing glimpses of beyond the here and now and hinting at that faraway land and how it's important to never quite reach it. Because the distant mountain theory that some suggest is derived from Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth actually has nothing to truly do with mountains, and somewhere along the way has transformed from Tolkien's observation in the 1960s to this catchy DMT, distant mountain theory. A world of mountains, an indescribable feeling of being small. If we turn to Tolkien's letters, we can see what he actually said is a little more universal than our favorite rocky ranges. To Colonel Warsket in 1963, he writes letter 247. "I am doubtful myself about the undertaking to give you more volumes about the imaginary world of Lord of the Rings. Part of the attraction of the Lord of the Rings is, I think, due to the glimpses of a large history in the background. An attraction like that of viewing far off an unvisited island, or seeing the towers of a distant city gleaming in a sunlit mist. To go there is to destroy the magic, unless unattainable vistas are again revealed."